Clinker Factor, the cement industry podcast.
Welcome to the Clinker Factor, a podcast from WCA which looks at the cement industry's response to climate change around the world and other topics of interest. I'm Ian Riley, CEO of WCA and your host on the Clinker Factor. Before we get started, I want to draw your attention to the 2023 WCA Annual Conference, which will be held on October the 24th and 25th at the Emirates Towers in Dubai. Super early bird tickets are available until June the 30th, and we still have a few exhibitor slots available. So we'll put a link to the registration website in the episode notes. Today I'm talking to Fabien Charbonnel, CEO of Cem'In'Eu, a European cement producer. Fabien joined the board of WCA at the end of last year, and so it's my pleasure today to welcome you, Fabien. I wonder if we could start with just a quick introduction. How is it you came up to work in the cement industry?
I entered the industry at the end of the 90s, and I worked for Ciment de Roigny in France, which was part of the Holderbank Group at this time, which was the name of Holcim before the new branding, the Swiss group. And so I worked firstly in cement, and then I worked also in the concrete division of this French company.
And when did you join Cem'In'Eu?
I came to Cem'In'Eu, it was 7 years ago now, when the company was launched. We began from scratch, and we wanted to bring some renewal in the industry in France and other countries within Europe. We all came from the big players of the cement industry, and we wanted to find new ways of producing cement by establishing small grinding stations within the markets and bringing the raw materials by train and or waterways from the point of entry of the raw materials of the clinker to the grinding stations.
Grinding stations obviously have been around for many years, but it was really this logistics aspect that was special about Cem'In'Eu. Is that right?
Yes, we have two main differentiation factors. The first one is the logistics between the point of import and the grinding station. We do it exclusively by train and by waterway. And when we do it by train, we use containers, ISO containers, 20 feet containers to move the clinker on the train.
And then when the ISO containers get to the plant, you have a special unloading system there, I believe.
Yes, we have a special crane to unload the containers from the train and then to unload the clinker from the containers. And then we store it at the plant. And of course, after the containers with the crane is put again on the wagons to get back to the point of entry.
What are the advantages of doing it in the way that you're doing it?
This way has two big advantages. First of all, it's to reduce the carbon footprint of the logistic, because when you use train or waterway, you have really a low carbon footprint in comparison with truck, of course. And the other big advantage is to have very low capex for these logistical solutions, because in comparison with traditional wagons for bulk raw materials, it's very cheap in capex to have this equipment.
Yeah, so you don't have to have the special bottom dumping wagons. You have standard containers.
Yes, and you can unload the clinker very easily from the containers. You don't need any big equipment to do so.
And are there any special advantages for the customers as well?
In our model for the customer, there is two important points. First of all, is that we have erected our grinding stations within the market, so we are inside the market. And in France, the main markets, they are not located near the sea on the coast, so they are inside the country, they are landlocked. So when you put the grinding station within the market, it's easier to reach the customer. And so you have an advantage regarding the delivery service to the customers for the cement, first of all. And the second advantage we have is that we have introduced an innovation regarding the bag market, because we are using an Haver-Unboker technology to have sealed polyethylene bags to present the cement in bag, to deliver the cement in bag. And so the end customer and the wholesalers, they are able to store our pallets outside, directly on the job site or outside the buildings of the wholesalers. And so it's really an advantage, because there is no problem of humidity within the traditional craft paper bags. And so we have a big success on this, and this is really appreciated by the customers.
Okay. And so thinking about the customers and looking at what you've seen over the last few years, how have the customers' requirements changed?
We have an increasing demand for low carbon product, because the regulations in France are now taking into account the carbon footprint of the building and the carbon footprint of the building materials within the building. So more and more we have demands from the customers and from the owner of the building to present a lower carbon footprint for concrete. And so it goes up into the chain. And for cement, you need to offer new products with a lower carbon footprint to meet this increasing demand for buildings.
And so is this driven specifically by regulation? So there's a requirement to exceed a certain carbon footprint for the concrete, or is it a sort of more complicated market demand coming from developers, who have their own stakeholders, not necessarily regulators, to please?
Okay, you have both phenomena. Of course, the new regulations and the increasing pressure for measuring and limiting the carbon footprint of construction materials is growing. And you have also, aside of this, specific strategies of actors within the market. It can come from the building owners who have a specific strategy to reduce their carbon footprint, or it can also come from the construction companies who also wants to reduce their carbon footprint. So it comes from all sides, and more and more it provokes an increasing regulation at the level of the building. So you have the different factors which are pushing this trend.
So one of the factors that I think in the UK has been having a big impact is the growing number of companies who are reporting Scope 3 emissions in addition to Scope 1 and 2 emissions. So for most of the developers and the contractors, their Scope 1 and 2 emissions are quite small. It's only when they get into Scope 3 that they have, these really huge carbon footprints. Do you think you're seeing the same trend there in France as well?
Yes, because the calculation, more and more the calculation is made at the level of the building. So when you make the carbon footprint calculation for a building, you take into account the carbon footprint of the construction materials used for this building. And so it has a very incentive effect to produce low carbon concrete, and so to use low carbon binders to produce this concrete.
So Fabien, with the grinding station set up, I wonder if there are certain advantages and certain disadvantages when you think about how you can compete in the low carbon cement market. So for example, we would expect in the next few years that LC3 will play a bigger role in cement in Europe. Are you in a position to offer LC3 to your clients who are interested in that, or how do you compete with that type of product?
Let me answer to this question in two ways. Firstly, when you have a grinding station, it's easier for you to move to low carbon cement because you do not have any asset for clinker. So you have really any constraint, any limitation to reduce the volume of clinker integrated into cement. So, I mean, it's easier for a player with only grinding stations to move to product with a lower clinker factor. Secondly, yes, we will offer LT3 type of cements in the future. We worked on this since 3 years now, and we defined ternary cement with natural pozzolans and with limestone. We made an analysis, a study. We defined what are the level of performance we want to reach for our cement, taking into account the constraints of the local standards, cement standards and concrete standards. We define what are the needs of the customers for the different applications. So we defined what level of compressive strength we wanted to reach at early age and at 28 days. We also define the fineness of the cement we wanted to produce. Then we made a review of the different raw materials locally available or available at reasonable logistic cost when you wanted to use these raw materials. And then we decided to work with natural local pozzolans, because as you know, in France, we had volcanoes in the past. So we have geological conditions for natural pozzolans. You have several quarries in France in different regions with this kind of raw materials. And so we defined to work with these alternative raw materials to decrease the global clinker factor. And it's very interesting to work with limestone and with these pozzolans. And when you are working with two alternative raw materials, limestone and pozzolan, you can reduce the clinker factor more in comparison with when you work only with one alternative raw material. So we produce two new products. The first one is for the bulk market, for ready-mix producer and precast producer. It's a Cem'In'Eu with pozzolan and limestone, with around 70% of clinker, 20% of pozzolans, and 10% of limestone. And with this type of product, you reduce the carbon footprint to around 620 kilo of carbon per ton of cement. For the reference, our Cem1 product is 890 kilo of CO2 per ton.
Fabien, can I just check those figures, the 890 and the 620, are they including scope 3?
Yes, including scope 3.
Yeah, you know, because a lot of the times when we quote these numbers in the cement industry, it's just scope 1 and 2.
No, it includes scope 3.
Yep.
The second product with a similar approach, but it is aimed at being sold to for the bag market, to Manson and small construction companies. And the clinker factor is even lower with this product because it's a Cem''2C with pozzolans and limestone. It's a 32.5 R product, and you have 56% of clinker, 29% of pozzolans, and 15% of limestone. And with this product, you decrease the carbon footprint to 506 kilos of CO2 per ton of cement. So it's a huge decrease in clinker factor and a huge decrease in carbon footprint, and it's permitted by the way that we combine all the effects of the pozzolans and the effects of the limestone in addition with clinker.
Just to clarify, what are the different strengths that you expect to get with your Cem1, the Cem''2B, and the Cem''2C?
Okay, for the Cem''2BM, so for the Cem''2B, for the bulk market, we have a 42.5 N strength lat, and for the bag market, For the second product, it's 32.5 R strength fat.
And your customers have been keen to use these lower carbon cements. When did you introduce those?
Okay, for the first one, we introduced it 3 months ago now. And for the last one, we are just launching it right now. So
great. Well,
it's
good
just
luck.
the beginning.
Good luck with the launch.
Thank you.
But do you anticipate that customers are going to continue to ask you for lower carbon cements?
We see it. The demand is really increasing, and so we think it will take each month more and more importance within our sales. It's difficult to evaluate what will be the pace of replacement of traditional cement by this new low carbon cement. It's really difficult to evaluate. Even our customers and the customers of our customers, they do not evaluate precisely what will be this rhythm of replacement. So it is difficult to say, but we feel and we have evidence that this is a growing demand within the market, because we see that the demand of the customers are more numerous every month, but it's difficult to define a precise timeline for this replacement.
One of the things that begins to affect the industry quite significantly is the cost of carbon and the reduction in the free allocations and this gradual movement to CBAM. So I know that Cem'In'Eu has been quite active in lobbying in this area. How are the changing regulations affecting you and for that matter, affecting the wider industry in France and in Europe more generally?
We know the carbon border adjustment mechanism will be put in place from 2026. It was voted at the European level, and so now the frame is defined and we know how it will work. There will be this new CBAM put in place in 3 years now, and at the same time, with the same pace, free quotas of carbon for the European producers will be phased out. So the frame is now very, very, very well defined, and we know that this pressure for carbon reduction will be, for all the sectors, will be increasing in the coming years. And 2026, it's very soon. Huh? We have to work on this. The price of carbon will increase because the constraints on carbon will be growing. So the price of carbon will increase. Some analysts and specialists say that it could go up to 250 euro per ton of carbon. Now it varies, but it's between 80 and 90 euro per ton. But this will create a real change within the industry in Europe. Huh? There will be a tremendous pressure to lower the carbon factor within the market. There will be a tremendous pressure to lower the carbon emission when you produce clinker, and all the actors will have to make some big investments for carbon capture, for clinker replacement by other raw materials. So this will lead to a massive increase of cost and massive increase of price of cement. So the change in 3 years, in 5 years will be very high, and the change at 10 years it will be even bigger. So it will be very interesting, and it's very exciting to live these years, because there will be a tremendous change in all our industry in the coming years.
Yes, I think the impact of this carbon pricing is very interesting, because in a sense, the industry players are all in the same boat, because they all have somewhat similar carbon emissions in terms of kilograms per ton for comparable cement type. But the cost of mitigation may be very different for different players. So if you're close to a CO2 hub, then probably your cost of capture and storage of CO2 is going to be much less than if you're very distant from that. And I guess one of the advantages that you have is that you can buy your clinker from wherever, and it may be that even clinker exporters to Europe start to think about carbon capture in order to export carbon-free clinker to the EU. So I think it's a fascinating area, and one that it's very difficult to see clearly how things will work out?
Yes, you will have different new factors of competitiveness within the industry. And as you say, in the industry for decades, the biggest competitive advantage was about geology. When you have your quarries and the distance between your quarries for clinker production and the markets. But all this will change because, as you say, you will have new competitive advantage linked to the carbon capture in function of where is located your clinker plant, your cement plant, and also what will be the distance between and the carbon footprint between the production of cement and the consumption of cement. And finally, what will be your access to alternative raw materials, enabling you to reduce your clinker factor. So all the cards will be redistributed, and this will impact highly the current industrial footprint of the industry.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think it promises to be a very interesting few years in Europe initially, but I expect that the trends and the changes we see in Europe will also spread to the rest of the world over time. So Fabien, thank you so much for talking to me today on the podcast. And I wish you well with your new low-carbon products.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Clinker Factor podcast today. If you've enjoyed it, do subscribe. And please recommend us to friends and colleagues and anyone else who you think would be interested in what's happening in the cement and concrete industry around the world. WCA is a not-for-profit company. Please visit our website to see the services that we offer